is full throttle tension that squeezes out your every last breath.
You repeat this order or I'll find somebody who will.
CBS TV says it's taut, tense, and terrific.
I'm assuming command of this ship. You're not assuming anything.
And Siskel and Ebert give 2 thumbs up to the summer's most thrilling, in-your-face smash hit.
Lock Captain Ramsey in his stateroom. They're fueling our missiles. Now!
Crimson Tide. Rated R. Now playing at a theater near you.
Hello and welcome back to Dave's Movie Diary, the pod where I reminisce about old films, discover some new films occasionally. It's not a technical deep dive by any means or a factual summation. It's just really my thoughts about the films, thoughts about maybe where I was at in life and what I've learned along the journey. Just a ramble, really. Anyway, this one is about Crimson Tide. And I'll say right from the top that I had some lost years from about 95 to around 99 or 2000 in terms of being young, living it up, and a lot of the films I saw in that period I would classify as either hangover watches, where I wasn't really paying a lot of attention, or I was watching these films with other people around and probably, again, concentrating more on the conversations or on particular people. And this one just really got past me. I don't recall seeing it. I did watch it again a couple of years ago, and found that it was an incredibly well-made film of its type and really enjoyed it. And I threw it on last night when my parents were here. I thought it was a pretty low risk for them. They're in their mid to late 80s. It's got Gene Hackman in it. It's got a youngish Denzel Washington in it. The action keeps up. It's not a falling asleep film, so it ticked a lot of boxes there. And then I think I've got a few things to say about it. Both my parents stayed awake the whole way through, stayed locked in. That's a big plus. There's a lot of connections for me with this material. It evokes a lot of the Tom Clancy novels that I read in my late teens that my dad was into as well. So this whole world of submarines, Cold War tension, the military hierarchy, the procedural details that happen on a sub, it all brings that back to me. And nostalgia is a really powerful emotion. It's very, very Hunt for Red October kind of territory. And so it goes along with those other Clancy books and films that came out: Patriot Games, Hunt for Red October, Clear and Present Danger, etc., etc. So watching this again, it wasn't just the film. It really felt like revisiting that entire world from a long, long time ago. What's it about? It's a fairly simple plot, but it's incredibly effective. Tensions are escalating in a politically unstable world following the collapse of the Soviet Union. Remember, this was made in 95. The Soviet Union collapsed and broke away. 91, 92 became Russia again. There's a US nuclear submarine for which Hackman is the commanding officer. Washington is the executive officer, so the second in charge. They are alerted because Russia is in a bit of disarray. There's a rebel element that's briefly taken control, and they're trying to get their hands on the release codes for the nuclear warheads. And so the submarine goes out. The US submarine goes out on standby. At some point, they receive partial or incomplete orders during a pretty hectic situation. And what immediately becomes clear is that there's two opposing interpretations of those orders. You've got the old school mentality, represented by Captain Frank Ramsey, which is the Hackman character. who believes that they should proceed with the original aim of the mission, which was to be proactive, make a preemptive strike. And then you've got the executive officer, Hunter, played by Denzel Washington, who is more cautious. He's the guy who's gone through military college. He's a philosophical guy. He's not convinced that war is the answer to everything. The other element, of course, doesn't have to be said, is that Hunter is a young black man. Ramsey is an old white guy. And that dynamic is more than alluded to. It's actually stated late in the film. And right from the get-go, there's tension between Hackman and Washington in this film, their characters. You can see that Hackman thinks, men of action like me, I've been there, I've done it. You haven't been there and done it. Yes, you're probably smarter than me in a book sense, but you haven't commanded men. Are you a real man? And Hunter, the Washington character, is saying, well, dinosaurs ruled the earth millions of years ago. They're extinct now. We're thinking, feeling humans that can rely on what history's taught us and make well-founded decisions. So there's ambiguity in the situation. Do they launch their weapons or not? Do they make a first strike on Russia and potentially lead the world into World War III, which would be catastrophic? This disagreement becomes the entire engine of the film because now they're completely cut off underwater. There's no comms. There's no clarity. There's no outside guidance. There's another Russian sub in the vicinity that's taking shots at them. There's just two men wrapped in this steel tube making decisions, and they're going at each other. And you got two alphas, just different shades of alphas. And for me, everything in the film just flows from that one conflict. And it's an acting masterclass between a guy who's been brilliant, who was brilliant for 35 years, and he's right at the end of his career. And you've got a young up-and-comer who's relatively new in Washington. What more do you need? I'd like to talk about Tony Scott. He directed this film. Everyone knows about Ridley Scott. Ridley Scott, of course, Gladiator, Alien, Blade Runner, many others in between and after, still making films. Esteemed filmmaker. Tony's his brother, and Tony's a different beast. While Ridley's more controlled, more atmospheric, often more intellectual in his framing of films, Tony's a lot more about pure energy, momentum, pressure, stylistic, maybe like a De Palma for the masses in terms of action films in that sense, without the voyeurism. Let's just go through some of the titles. Top Gun, Days of Thunder, The Last Boy Scout. This film, Crimson Tide. Enemy of the State, Man on Fire, again with Denzel. A little film in there that I didn't mention called True Romance, which I would probably say is neck and neck with this film for his best. I'd probably say True Romance just because I've got a lot more history with that film. It's based on a Tarantino script. It's got the cast to die for. Anyway, I'll shut up now about True Romance. That's for another day. What I'm saying here is that Tony Scott's films always look incredible. I think he teamed up a few times with the Simpson Bruckheimer duo that were infamous at the time for making these big budget films. Some of which work, some of which didn't. So anyway, this is a Tony Scott film. What he does brilliantly here, for me, is take something very contained, which is a submarine, and ramp it up and make the best use of it and turn it into a pure psychological experience. There's nowhere to go. There's no escape. There's just this rising tension, the situation, and between the two main actors. Gene Hackman, wow. I've run out of things to say about this guy. He's just extraordinary in this film. It's one of his last truly dominant performances, or maybe his last. After this, there's really obviously the Royal Tenenbaums around 2000, which he is fantastic in, and also Enemy of the State. But in this one, he's really old Gene Hackman. You know, just a physical presence. I always forgot how big and commanding Hackman is, and he goes toe to toe here with Denzel in his prime. He plays Captain Ramsey, like a man who's shaped entirely by experience and intuition, and what he's learned, what he knows, what he's gone through. War, hierarchy, authority. He believes in his instincts over procedures, as you'll see in the film. Look, it's pointless. It's pointless going through Gene Hackman's big moments. There's been too many of them. I did catch myself thinking, though, this was the guy who was third fiddle in Bonnie and Clyde in 1967. Third fiddle to Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway. And he very quickly zoomed past both of those folks in terms of acting prowess, in terms of the legacy that he leaves us on screen. Yes, I know Warren Beatty was a mover and shaker in many different other ways, directed as well, produced. But geez, Gene Hackman was just a colossus. You know, French Connection, Conversation, Hoosiers, Unforgiven, this film. Just to reel off a few off the top of my head, Night Moves. You know, there's so many, even Superman. What's brilliant, though, is that even when I disagree with these characters, I always understand the character and I understand what Hackman's trying to put across. In this one, he's not a bad guy. He's not a villain. He's just an old system operating at full intensity, and he's stretched. Hackman just plays him like the force of nature that he is. He was 65 at the time. He looks about 55. Brilliant. Denzel, at a really interesting point in his career, because for me, when I think about it, at this point in time, he's really balancing two very different modes. On the one hand, he's quickly becoming a mainstream Hollywood lead, and he's really owning that. But on the other, he's still well inside the Spike Lee stable, which is where he makes some of his early contributions in films that I really loved when I saw them back then. I'm talking about films like Malcolm X, of course, Mo Better Blues, and he went on to make He Got Game, which is another one after, I think that's 98. Brilliant. Inside Man, of course, another Spike Lee film, much more nearly like a Tony Scott film in a lot of ways, heist thriller. But what I really like about him at this time is that he was equally competent. He didn't feel like a fish out of water in either of these streams. And then you compare that with what he was doing mainstream. He'd come out of Philadelphia, where I would argue that he's actually better than Hanks in that. I think he's doing more. I think it's a much more unlikable part. Hanks has got a much more sympathetic role in that, and he's awesome. But I think Denzel's doing something really interesting in that. He goes on, makes The Hurricane, based on Reuben Carter, of course, and then Training Day just confirms that this guy is at the top of his game. He's sort of done the Liam Neeson thing now and gone off and mainly makes action thrillers like I can't even remember. The Equalizer trilogy. But back around this time, I've forgotten Glory as well. But he was really an actor's actor and bringing something different, bringing a different vibe. Definitely back then, I think it was significant that people said he was the next coming of Sidney Poitier, and that's a big call in black culture. in this one, he's really, really controlled, and right from the get-go, from the first meeting with Hackman, he's really trying not to get angry because Hackman's throwing a lot at him. He's trying to test him. He's trying to see if he's a man. And he's expressing himself in terms of logic, restraint, moral calculation, being politically correct a lot of the time. And he's representing procedure and structure and systems thinking. And that puts him in direct conflict with Hackman. And you know it's a matter of time before they clash. And boy, do they clash. So for me, when I was watching this and reflecting on it, yes, this is set on a submarine, and yes, this is a Cold War thriller, but really it's a philosophical argument, and Hackman represents that instinct and experience, and we've got to do something. We're men of action, and Denzel's representing that procedure and systems that I just talked about. Because there's not enough information in this story, neither one is fully right and neither one is fully wrong. This is what makes it so compelling. And the film, to Tony Scott's credit, never goes into a simplistic good versus bad universe. It's just two competing worldviews that are under extreme pressure. And when they get to go at each other, it is incendiary. It's one of the best scenes I can think of in a movie where you've got two heavyweights not taking a backward step. You can feel the tension. It's palpable. Great supporting cast in this. Viggo Mortensen, one of his early, more substantial roles, coming off of Carlito's Way a couple of years earlier. He's not bringing maybe some of the usual Viggo energy in terms of a Lothario or a different vibe. In this one, he's the straight-laced guy. He's the really controlled, quiet guy who's even more rigid with systems than Denzel is. But his role is absolutely essential in some key moral decision moments as the guy in charge of weapons. And it's an early look at what he went on to become, obviously in the Lord of the Rings films, but also in other interesting movies like A Perfect Murder, Eastern Promises. What was that other one? History of Violence. That's a really good underrated performance. The Road, of course. I mean, yeah, he's still knocking out great films all the time. It was great to see James Gandolfini in this one. I have mixed emotions whenever I see that legend. The Sopranos was a game changer for me in terms of what TV could do, and it was so important in our culture back then. It was a water cooler discussion. It was a must-watch. Channel 9 did some interesting things to it back then, putting it on at all hours, cutting it. I don't know. Anyway, don't get me started. But I just love his presence. As soon as I saw him in True Romance, in that breakout scene with Patricia Arquette, as the hitman who's sort of got a heart before he starts hitting a woman. That's really complicated, I know, but if you watch True Romance, you'll understand. He's still a bit slimmed down here, but he's still bringing that same energy. You just know which side of the fence he's going to come down on here when we get the mutiny happening. And Sopranos is right around the corner, and then sadly he was gone too soon. I feel like it was 2011 or 2012 he departed, but yeah, love seeing him. There's a couple of other guys here. One speaks and one doesn't. Steve Zahn, perfectly cast, down under, doing the nitty-gritty, trying to plug some leaks. An early appearance from him. Before he went on and did some really astonishing work, especially in that Tremmy miniseries that HBO did later on with John Goodman. He is just out of this world in that miniseries. If you haven't seen Tremmy, get a hold of it and watch it. It's about the New Orleans disaster in whatever it was, 2005 maybe. Ryan Philippe's also in this, but he doesn't say anything. He's just there as a young guy. There's some other young guys, I'm sure, that look vaguely familiar, but I didn't take the time to look into who they were. but there's plenty of actors in this that you kind of think you know. So yeah, look, there are some themes in this film. Obviously, it's about authority coming up against procedure and experience against systems. I already talked about that. Nuclear responsibility was still a big thing back then. I mean, it always is. It's still an ever-present in our world today, maybe as an underpinning threat. But back then, it felt real. I grew up in the 70s and 80s when the Cold War was at its height. There were some near misses. The spectre of the Cuban Missile Crisis was never too far away. And so it was always in the back of Gen X's mind, which is my generation. So moral decision-making under situations where you don't have all the information. Leadership definitely under pressure. And a generational shift in military thinking, which perhaps is reflected in some of the conflicts we saw, where the US made sure that it went in with overwhelming might. You look at the first Gulf War in 91 under Colin Powell. I guess trying to minimize loss of life instead of the old ways of just throwing more and more men into the mix. The key scenes, there's two really key scenes for me. There's the first meeting between Hackman and Denzel, where Hackman's sizing him up, offering him the role of XO, and there's a little bit of very subtle alpha marking of territory going on by Hackman. Denzel doesn't bite, but you know it's coming. Then there's the situation inside the submarine, the pressure building. There's a few little takedown scenes where Hackman's taking Denzel aside and saying, look, this is the way I do it. You got to get with the program. Things start escalating. Then we're into some tension-filled situations. And then we have the big burst out where Gene just tells him, shut the fuck up and do what I tell you. And the look on Denzel's face is priceless. Later on, we get Denzel in charge, having to make the really tough moral decision about whether to close the hatches and condemn 3 men to death. That's probably the hardest decision in the film because it's a known quantity. There's the final confrontation, waiting around to see if the radio can be prepared. And that's when the suspense really gets to its zenith. So what really made this film work for me is that it's not about the action scenes, awesome as they are and believable as they are. It's really about that dynamic between Hackman and Washington, the pressure building between those two men, these two alpha dogs. And even when nothing much is happening, and generally that's not the case, everything does feel like it could collapse at any moment. Is this a date film? Possibly. I mean, it's exciting. It's not too long, but it's very masculine. There's no women in it. It's very procedural. Not sure about that one. I think it's definitely a hangover film. You don't have to keep up with every little plot shift, and there's quite a few. You can just sit back and enjoy Hackman and Denzel. Tony Scott always makes his films look incredible. Bumps along. It's a comforting film in a way. You've got this contained world. I if I had to choose, I'd go hangover film rather than date film. So look, summing up, this film really works because for me, it was simple when it boils down to it. It's 2 men on a submarine with a really hard decision to make, and everything else grows from that. And we get a couple of fantastic performances. Hackman at full force in his last time really going at someone, which he's so good at. Denzel showing us his controlled intensity and how much he's learned in 7 or 8 years of being in feature films. And a really cool, interesting supporting cast that just reinforces the pressure of the environment. So I think it's one of those films that proves you don't need complexity in the structure. You just need clarity in conflict, and Hackman and Washington bring it in spades. So one of Tony Scott's best. I still mark it slightly below True Romance. But check it out. It's on Disney at the moment, so enjoy it. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.